Crop Talk on Market Journal is supported by Nebraska's soybean farmers and their checkoff.
Well, up next, a lot of planters are rolling across the heartland, and some of them, for the past couple of years now, have been planting into some dry conditions. And there's some things, if that's you, that you want to keep in mind. To that point, recently had the chance to catch up with Extension Educator Steve Melvin to get some tips when it comes to planting into dry conditions. Market Journal's Mike Straub is standing by with this story. Mike?
The Nebraska Drought Monitor shows 55% of Nebraska in moderate to exceptional drought. Soil condition is perhaps the most critical component to planting because soil conditions set the stage for decisions we make regarding planter adjustments, which crop is planted, and planting depth. When planting into drier conditions, increased down pressure is most likely necessary.
Yeah, the soil moisture this spring is kind of all over the place. Some places have had some really nice rains and some haven't had quite as much, and so obviously when we go out to the field with the planter, we need there to be sufficient moisture in the soil to make the planter work correctly. Now, our planters have a lot of adjustments on them, and we can adjust them to make them work in, wetter soils or drier soils, but we really need to think about that when we go to the field. And particularly last spring, we really worried about just extremely dry soils, and some places are that way again. And there may be an opportunity where one would want to think about putting some water on to get the planter to go in the ground deep enough. That's probably the main reason you'd think about it. Typically though, we think about if we can get the seed in the ground reasonably decent, that if we're going to maybe incorporate some herbicide or something, we can also get some water to the seed to take off if it's dry. Obviously the goal is that we're not going to need to run the center pivot right after we plant. We don't need the moisture this time of year typically, but it's getting the seed off to a good start is a really high priority. So it is something to consider, and if we're concerned the herbicide that we put on may not get incorporated from rainfall, then it's a good idea sometimes to put some water on and get the herbicide into the soil and get the seed watered well.
Watering before planting is recommended if the planter needs higher soil moisture levels to work well. If the soil is too hard, too powdery, or cloddy, it may be worth running the pivot. Otherwise, the recommendation is to run the pivot after you plant if needed.
Well, I think with early irrigation, sometimes we take a look at a field and see what it's got for subsoil moisture. Obviously alfalfa is a place that uses the water really, really deep, and if we've got an irrigated alfalfa field, we want to get some water on them early and try and get some down into those deeper depths, maybe 4, 5, 6 feet with an established alfalfa stand. When we're looking at a corn or soybean field that was reasonably well watered last year, typically it only takes maybe 2 to